Greetings, greetings, greetings. My name is Dr. V, and welcome to Writing What I Like, Field Notes of a Black Woman Scholar. In today's Field Notes, or in this particular podcast, for those of you who are new, we call them Field Notes and not podcast episodes. But anyhow, today I actually share with you a lecture that's from my Write Like a Scholar, Write for Impact online course. I hope that you enjoy this quick peek into my writing course that's online. Again, it's titled Write Like a Scholar, Write for Impact. Enjoy. Welcome to Write Like a Scholar, Write for Impact. My name is Dr. V, and today we are going to start the journey on leading you on your way to becoming a writer. So again, my name is Dr. Venus Evans Winters, or Dr. V, and I am your African muse. You are here because you want to write like a scholar. You want to write for impact. And before we can talk about how to become a better writer or a writer who writes for impact, we first need to explore the myths that you hold about who is a writer, right? So what are some of the myths that we have about who is a writer? First, when we think about a writer, we typically think about that person who's just creative, like they were born creative, right? They are a creative person. Also, another myth that we hold about who is a writer is that we think about someone who writes full time, like someone whose job it is to write full time, or they work independently, but they write full time. But either way, a writer in our mind is someone who gets paid to do it. Now, we all like money, right? But it's a myth that only people who get paid to write are true writers. Another myth that we hold in our mind about who is a writer, it's a person who's already published, a published author. So one myth that we have is that unless I am published or I have a contract with a publishing company, then I'm not truly an author. Or unless I've already published in academic journals, then I'm not really a writer. Or another myth is I'm not an author or a writer if I haven't been published in a popular magazine, right? Like Essence or Ebony, right? But then, so now let's talk about who is not a writer. Who is not a writer? So then you're not a writer if you don't get paid to write. You're not a writer if you're just not naturally creative, or you're not a writer if you have not been published. So these are some of the myths that we hold in our mind about who is a writer and who is not a writer. So if you have these myths in your mind about who is a writer and who is not a writer, then why do you want to be a writer? So let's dispel all the myths and the misconceptions. Let me get my tongue right. So what does that mean to you? What does it mean to you to be a writer? Who is a writer? How does a writer live? What does a writer do? Where does a writer write? So these are some of the questions that we're going to ask throughout our time together as I lead you to better practices as a writer. It's my job to shift your mindset. So let's talk about how do you become a writer, right? What should you expect a writer to do? So question one, who is a writer? The answer is a writer is whomever wants to be a writer, right? So we all know 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, or 7-year-olds who write. Some of us have even come across books that has been written by pre-adolescents, right? Or children authors, right? But whoever wants to be a writer can write. But so what makes you different? What makes you a different person when it comes to writing? So why do we want to pick up your work? What's going to make you stand out as a writer? Well, to become a writer who writes with impact, you have to have swag. Do you have swag? That is my question to you, right? So what differentiates you from the hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of other writers out there, or those people who want to be a writer but don't actually commit to the process of writing. So my question to you is, do you have swag? Okay, do you have swag? You're probably thinking, Dr. V, what do you mean by swag? Let me tell you what I mean by swag, right? What do you bring? What do you bring to the writing process? Why would people want to invest in your writing? Why do people want to join your team? And like when I say join your team, meaning they want to read everything you write. They want to consume what it is you write. They want to know what you know, right? So first, a writer who writes with swag has self-knowledge. You are self-reflective and self-aware. So you have something that you can offer to other people because you have self-knowledge. You have learned from your lived experiences. You have learned from your trials and tribulations. You have something great to share. Also, to have swag as a writer who writes for impact, you also have been a witness. You have witnessed something, whether that's good or bad. You are giving witness to it. You are bearing witness, and you have something that your audience want to hear. You also know what is your art form, right? So if you are a poet, then you may write poetry, right? If you are more of a creative writer, then you may be interested in writing novels, right? If you like to tell stories, and there are different art forms for different writers, and you have to know your lane, right? So although in my mind, I'm a rapper, you will probably never find me writing rap lyrics. That's not my art form. That's not my ministry, right? I am more like a sociological, anthropological, and cultural writer. So I tend to write from a space where I'm analyzing social phenomenon. So what is your art form? Are you a dancer, right? So if that's what you do, then how do you teach other people how to dance through writing? Right? Are you a poet? If you are a poet, then maybe you want to write books of poetry or books of poems, or you want to start blogging some of your pieces, or that's what you that's based you like maybe you're a drawer, so maybe you want to transform your art or your drawings into literature form. Lastly, to have swag is also to know your gifts. Your gifts. And that again takes self-reflection and self-knowledge. So what is your gift? For example, if your gift is dancing, then can you figure out how to use your dancing as inspiration to inspire your writing? Or if you are a dancer, can you write about the methodologies and methods of dance? If you are a great cook, like if your family knows, oh my God, Auntie, she is chef, right? Auntie can throw down, or Mama be putting her foot in it. If your gift is cooking, hey, maybe you need to write about cooking. If you are a great reader, right? That's a gift for some people. Hey, I'm a great reader and I know how to interpret what I read. Then you read and you interpret it for other people. Some people call that a critic, a cultural critic, right? So that would be, for example, bell hooks. Bell hooks is great at looking at a movie, reading other people's work, and then critiquing it and deconstructing it for the rest of us, okay? So find out what your gifts are. You bring swag to the writing process, or when you bring swag to the writing process, all of yourself, then you're more likely to become a writer who writes for impact. Next, what does a writer do? Right? So what does a writer do? So when people ask me, Dr. V, how did you become a writer? How did you become an author? Like, how did you find a stage? Or how do you know your audience? How do you stay motivated? What does a writer do? I'm going to tell you guys a secret. I'm going to tell you a secret. What a writer does is a writer reads. A writer reads. You cannot become a writer who writes for impact without reading. Now, keep in mind, again, anybody can write. A 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old can write. We've seen it, right? But those who write for impact are avid readers, right? That's what we do. That's how we not only find information, that's how we synthesize information, that's how we critique information, and that's how we even get ideas about what to write, okay? So a good writer is a good reader. And it's also like reading teaches us new vocabulary. It teaches us like style of flow, right? So even me as a Black woman scholar, right? My first language is Black English. My language at home is Black English. So sometimes when I read across genres and different types of literature, it not only increases my vocabulary and my awareness, but it also improves on my flow and how I write. It takes me to different worlds, you know? But anyhow, so read, but also a great writer or a writer who writes for impact also writes. Like we write. Like you all do not understand what it's like for me as a writer when I hear people say, I like writing. I just don't have time for writing, right? Or I want to be an author. I want to be published. I want to do what you do, but I just don't have time to write. Well, you know what, honey? A writer who writes for impact writes all the time. I write all the time. I write curriculum for my students. I write syllabi. I write clinical notes. I have to write podcasts. I have to write PowerPoints. I have to write speeches. I write news posts. I write policy analysis. I write journal reflections. I write poem. I write prose. I might even write like rap lyrics, even though you all will never hear my flow. Okay, so write, which comes to the point again, when does a writer write? When does a writer write? A writer writes all the freaking time. I'm a little dramatic, y'all, but a writer writes all the freaking time. Okay, so you write in a journal, you write on your computer, you write on your phone. I write on napkins in a restaurant. So I'm always thinking, I'm always pondering, I'm always crafting. I'm always crafting my words, okay? So write all the freaking time. And my PowerPoint is jumping, so let me see what's going on here. So in this next slide, I want you to also finally ask these questions, okay? Well, let me go back one more slide. Let's see if this works for me. Okay, another question. Where does a writer write? Okay, so if we're writing all the time, where do we write? A writer who writes for impact, you can write anywhere. You can write in bed. You can write at the kitchen table. You can write at your office desk or in your nook. You can go, some people write at the bookstores and coffee shops, the library. Find a place to write and make it a ritual so your mind begins to associate that space with the craft and skill of writing, okay? So just write and find a space of your own, and whatever stimulates you, whatever motivates you, that's your spot. Okay, so now let's go to my pop quiz, okay? So, question, why do you write? Why do you write? Do you write for self-reflection? Yes or no? Do you write for self-reflection? Yes or no? Second, do you write because it is a part of your job? So do you write for work, and is that what you get paid to do? Do you write because it's a part of your job? Yes or no? Next, do you write because you have something to say about politics or the social world or human interactions and experiences? So do you write because you have something to say about politics? Next, do you write because you like to motivate people? Yes or no? Do you write because you need to prepare for events? And by events, I mean, it can be a speaking engagement, it can be interviews, it can be podcasts, it might be sermons at church, it might be speeches, or maybe we write memorandums for school boards or for your office or for a think tank, etc. So do you write because you need to prepare for special events? Last question. Do you write because you feel like you will suffocate if you did not write? Yes or no? Okay. So if you answered yes to any of these 6 questions, then you have what it takes to become a writer who writes for impact. So if you answer yes to any of these questions, you are ready to become a writer. Now, finally, the question that people always ask me, right, of all ages, all races and ethnicities, language backgrounds, when they come to me, like, how do you become a writer? How do I become a writer? Well, that is the purpose of this class. It's not going to be one, PowerPoint or one discussion. It's actually a process. And I'm going to share with you my methodologies and methods for becoming a writer who writes for impact.